Hi everyone, welcome to the second lesson of Intro to Scratch. Today we will be talking about events in motion. What are events? If you imagine that a chunk of code is like a story, events are what allow the story to begin. In order for your code to work, you need to start with an event block. What is motion? Motion is exactly what it sounds like, how your sprite moves. Let's get introduced to the event and motion blocks. First, start off by creating a new project. First up are the event blocks. You may notice the shape of these blocks are different, as you can't put anything on top of them, which is why they are always going to be the start of your code. This block we have here is when the green flag is clicked. This means that whenever the green flag is clicked, whatever code you code underneath it will run. This is one of the blocks we will be using the most often. The next block is when blank key is pressed. You can put in any key you'd like, and when that key is pressed, the code you put underneath will run. Next is the when this sprite is clicked block. When you click the sprite, then whatever you code will run. And here we have the when backdrop switches to blank backdrop block. When the backdrop switches to the specified backdrop, then your code will run. This is the when loudness or timer is greater than a specified value. If your sound reaches a certain loudness or your timer reaches a certain amount of time, then the code will run. Finally are the three broadcast message blocks. First is when I receive a message, second is broadcasting a message, and third is broadcasting a message and waiting. Broadcasting a message is like sending a nudge to another sprite or another backdrop. When the sprite or backdrop receives the nudge, it can do what you want to do with it. For example, these might be important in games or animations when you really want to get the timing exactly right. The difference between broadcast message and wait is that broadcast message and wait will wait for the code on the receiving end to finish running before running the rest of the code. Now let's talk about motion. First up is the move blank steps block. This will simply move your sprite forward however many steps you tell it to. And next are the turn blank degrees left or right blocks. These are one of the ways you can rotate your sprite. Next is the go to random position or mouse pointer block, where when you click it, it will instantly go to either a random position or go to your mouse pointer. Next is the go to block, which will go to a specific coordinate. Your coordinate is your sprite's exact location. The X is the horizontal position and the Y is the vertical. As you can see, I've moved this sprite back to 0, 0, which is the very center of the stage. When I move this sprite down, the Y value gets smaller, and when I move it up, the Y value gets bigger. The same is for the X axis. When you move the sprite to the right, then the X value gets bigger, and when you move it to the left, it gets smaller. Something cool about the go-to block is that the coordinates will change to wherever you move your sprite to. As you can see, I've moved the sprite to the following position, and the block has changed to that position. Glide blocks function in basically the same way as the go-to blocks, except that you can see the sprite move rather than it instantly going to the position. The point and direction block points your sprite in the direction that you move the arrow to. The difference between the turn block and the point and direction block are that the turn block turns the sprite from the position it's currently in, while the point and direction block will point in the same direction no matter what position your sprite is currently in. For example, pointing in the direction 180 degrees will always mean down, but turning 180 degrees will turn from the position that the sprite is currently in. The next block is the point towards block. Typically this drop-down menu will have a mouse pointer as well as any other sprites you put. For example, let's add a sprite. Now when we change the drop-down menu selection, the sprite will simply point towards the other sprite. This is the change X by block, which will either increase or decrease your X coordinate by the value you put in. This is different than the move 10 steps block. If you watch the X coordinate while we move 10 steps, as you can see, one step is not equal to one coordinate point. This is the set x block, which just sets your x coordinate. The change y by and set y2 blocks are basically the same as the previous two blocks, except they control your y coordinates, or the vertical axis. When you use the if on edge bounce block, when the sprite hits the edge of the stage, it will bounce off and go back into the stage. The next block is set rotation style, where you have the options left, right, don't rotate, and all around. So if you set it to left, right, then the sprite will always stay upright facing and will only flip between left and right, versus all around, where it will be able to rotate all the way around. The next few blocks are all variables, which are something we'll talk about later. If you notice the shape, they're ovals, so you can put them into the various white ovals in the blocks, like so. Variables in essence hold information, so for example, this x position block will now hold 1, and now when we click this block, the sprite will move forward by 1 coordinate point. You can also press the check marks next to the variables, and these will show the variable values on your screen. And now you know all about all of the motion and events blocks and are ready to move on to your first project. The project for this lesson is a pen game. The goal of this project is to have a sprite that will move and draw when you press on each of the arrow keys. Now pause the video here and try the project out on your own. If you ever get stuck, feel free to continue watching. To get started, we'll need to add the pen blocks, which are additional blocks found in the blue button on the bottom left corner of the screen. Now let's get started on putting our events. The first thing we'll need to do is make sure that the pen is down the whole time, so we'll need the green flag is clicked block, as well as a pen down block. To code for each of the 4 arrow keys so that the sprite will move in the direction that we want it to. Add 4 when blank key is pressed blocks, 1 for each arrow key. Now we'll need to make sure that the sprite points in the right direction so it can move in the right direction. Add a point and direction block underneath each of the when blank key is pressed blocks. Then click on the number and move the arrow to where you want your sprite to point for that arrow key. For example, for the up arrow key, we want the arrow to point up, and for the down arrow key, we want it to point down. Finally, we need to make sure the sprite will move when we press each of the keys, so add a move 10 steps block underneath each of the 4 events. And now you're done with the basic program. If you want to add something extra, you can add an erase button. For example, I use the space button, so when you hit the space button, all of the pen on the stage will erase. Feel free to also play around with other pen effects using the other blocks in the pen section, as well as changing your sprite or your backdrop. Congratulations on finishing your first official project. Now that we finished the lesson, here are some extra ideas to help practice your skills. The first is send a message to practice broadcasting, and the second is glide around to practice motion. Here are some examples of the projects. Make sure to read the instructions on the screen for more details, and feel free to use your creativity to make the project your own. Thank you for watching.